What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of MUT Tips. I'm your host, Sean Taylor from the Made Up Theater. And before we jump in, make sure to like the video down below, leave a comment, and as always, subscribe on YouTube down below to be informed of upcoming videos and live streams. Ring that bell. Now let's jump into today's topic, unpolish your improv. Improv is unscripted, and we always say treat mistakes as gifts. We also say treat them as opportunities to discover something new, interesting, or just unexpected. But sometimes we have a tendency to not treat them as gifts, treat them as almost like errors in the scene and try to fix them in the moment rather than see what potential we can uncover by continuing to embrace the mistake. And this is essentially just us polishing our improv. I use this expression all the time, incorporate the stumble into the dance. So let's imagine there's a scene where you do a dance and right as you start it, you kind of trip a little bit, right? It looks like a mistake, but then you just kind of keep going with it and incorporate it into your dance. Now the thing is though, is in 10 minutes, maybe 10 minutes later, you call back that dance and you do it again. You gotta keep that stumble in there, right? Because otherwise it's calling attention to the fact that you actually are dismissing it as just a mistake rather than something memorable, unexpected that you are now maintaining and establishing as a pattern. I'll give you another example too. Maybe there's an improvised scene between two people and they're like in an elevator. And as the scene progresses, it becomes kind of clear that these two people don't know each other. They don't have a relationship. And as an introductory student, you might have learned, choose to know each other, have relationships. I teach that myself. So maybe one of the performers makes the choice to say, hey, didn't we used to be lab partners back at Hopkins? And then it just kind of injects that relationship in there. And that is a way to go. That's essentially polishing the scene and kind of correcting the mistake. But how can we have fun being unpolished in this scene? Choosing not to correct the fact that we don't have a relationship. Maybe a line is dropped instead of that line about being lab partners. Maybe someone says, when we get to the 79th floor, I'm never gonna see you again. And that's kind of just an interesting line, right? If we are never gonna see each other again, what might happen next? Maybe the other scene partner just chooses, to fart or something. And then the other guy's like, what, dude? And he's like, hey, I'm never gonna see you again. And it's just like, we're kind of now exploring a fun scene about two strangers who don't have that social pressure of having to look good in front of another person because you're afraid I'm gonna see this person tomorrow. These two aren't gonna see each other ever again. So that is something that you can explore and heighten. And it's, having fun in the unpolished scenario of not knowing each other. And the cool thing about that scene is we didn't have the pressure to invent something to find our way out and just kind of quickly polish a detail into the scene that makes us connected. We found a way to be connected to each other without having the pressure of trying to invent some type of past history. Another example might come from names. Maybe your character has been established as Greg. Everybody calls you Greg in this improvised story or scene. And then somebody comes in and maybe they call you Carl. They make the mistake, maybe they didn't hear that you were called Greg or they forgot and they just blurted out Carl. And there is a typical way out of this scene, which is essentially polishing that mistake out of existence and being like, oh yeah, Greg Carl, you call me by my middle name. Yeah, my full name's Greg Carl. And I've seen that happen a ton of times. And you'll get a little chuckle and it just kind of moves past it, right? Why can't we just embrace the fact that somebody called you the wrong name? There's a lot of different ways to go about this. Maybe the person who's Greg responds to being called Carl with Carl. Oh man, all my life I've been called Greg. Some monosyllabic name and I'm just so forgettable, but Carl. Oh yeah, I like the sound of that. From this day forward, I'm called Carl! And then now, just embracing that choice, that mistake, and just living in this unpolished scenario, it just creates a whole new opportunity for fun, and it even adds a layer to your character. A fun way to practice this in class or a rehearsal or just with your improv team is to do a series of scenes, but break as many rules as possible. That's your goal in this, okay? I've heard it described as do bad improv, which yeah, you could do that as well. I like to more so think of it as just breaking as many rules as possible, okay? Because bad improv sometimes can turn into making each other look bad, and I still want the sense of fun on stage and making each other look and feel good. But we're gonna break rules along the way. So we're gonna, do stranger scenes, do scenes with just questions in it, do transaction and teaching-based scenes. Do scenes where it's just big, crazy, absurd choices and not worry about, hey, let's take the local to Crazy Town. No, let's just be there right away, right? Obviously, you're not going to necessarily do this on stage because it can look kind of like, chaotic, and it doesn't necessarily translate as fun for the audience. But you'll notice when you do it this way, it just kind of makes you feel a little bit liberated, right? Just not having to follow and conform to rules as a way to be polished on stage. There is a sense of fun that comes from being unpolished. In fact, if you're like an actor or a voice actor, or even just if you audition for improv groups, some people can look too polished, like they know the rules too well, or like they know the script from front to back perfectly, and it doesn't come across as natural. There's a good sense of adding rawness to your performance, and actually being kind of relatable to the audience rather than just like a seasoned performer who knows all the rules front and back and you enforce them on stage all the time. No, sometimes you gotta have fun breaking the rules. I always tell people you don't wanna lose that sense of magic that you maybe initially had when you took your first improv class because you got overwhelmed with rules. If you lose that sense of magic, get it back. Screw the rules, go out there and have some unpolished fun. And that concludes this episode of MUT Tips, everybody. Thank you so much for checking it out. I really appreciate it. Again, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you next time for another episode of MUT Tips. Bye.